thank you also, Mr. Peschlaner, for your presentation. I think you said many interesting things regarding the transformation, not just of tourism, but also the structure of tourism, so the DMOs. And I absolutely agree what has been said so far. And actually, I would like to pick up the issue of how do we define success, which was probably already a central part of the publication you mentioned, Dirk. So it's not a new issue we are talking about, but it is still very relevant, and it's really important to still ask this question and to come up with solutions that are suitable for our development of tourism. Why am I here? I am a researcher in a university north of Berlin, focusing on sustainable tourism, and I've been working quite a lot on indicators. But also in the last 2 years, we started an initiative where we brought together German tourism destinations. It's about 20 destinations now from all over the country that are already working and engaged in sustainable tourism. And with these destinations, we tried to come up with solutions, with inputs and new ideas on how to stimulate their activities. And what we did in the last months is to talk about indicators, and especially in terms of how can we set up indicators in terms that they reflect the goals of DMOs and destinations. We have not come so far to talk about beyond DMOs. So it's, we rather put a focus on tourism, actually, because we still believe that there's a big gap also in the knowledge of how tourism can be reflected in terms of quantifiable measures. So this is maybe the opener also, that the initial thought was actually what has been measured so far in tourism. And the people that we worked with actually reflected that until now, we always try to value what is there, so what already can be measured. But it's very important to get beyond this and to actually measure what needs to be valued. That's what has been said before. So we need to really critically reflect on the measures and on the indicators that are out there. This is what we tried with this group of German tourism destinations. Maybe to pick up what Mr. Peschlaner said, if tourism develops in an atmosphere which is not managed through evidence-based information, it will inevitably lead to problem situations. And this is not a new idea. It's been said before 50 years ago. But we still need to focus even more on this to get tourism better managed and to keep tourism grow and not grow in terms of quantitative or volume-based growth indicators, but rather like mature-based indicators, let's put it this way. So we need to find indicators that are better suitable for reflecting the development of tourism. And we know a lot about the value of tourism. This chart, unfortunately, is in German here, what you can see, but there is a lot of implications of the value of tourism in the economic term. So we know very well what economic effects tourism can have, but we do not know a lot about the environmental and socio-cultural effects. So that is why we should also focus on these issues. And of course, the economic value still is very important, but we need to put more effort on the other dimensional parts of sustainability. That is why we set up a group, and we thought about what actually should be a good set of so-called key performance indicators and how to manage this. And we firstly said that, of course, we need to agree on a core set of indicators. This is the main part. And there is a lot out there, but still, maybe it does not really fit what some destinations are looking for. And then we need to actually really focus on the performance and the development character of these indicators. So the main focus is not the indicator itself, but rather the outcome of the indicator and the problem that it's actually reflecting and the target that it's actually looking for. I think this has not been elaborated enough, that indicators actually need to aim for a specific target and reflect this target. And then, of course, the data needs to be harmonized. We heard this before, that data only makes sense if it actually can be used and can be compared and can be interpreted. So there needs to be a data harmony. And this is, of course, an aspect of methodologies. And then, of course, it needs to be analyzed, evaluated, and then presented. But the first three pillars I just presented, that were the aims that we tried to tackle in this group. And how did we do this? First, we actually talked about like initial things and set boundaries first. So we needed to think about, what do we mean with sustainable tourism? And we actually really thought about different levels, different spatial dimensions of the destination level, meaning that, of course, the DMOs need indicators, but then again, it needs to be also reflected in the activities below their scopes, meaning that on the local level and then also on the business level. And we, as I said before, the data needs to be harmonized. So the same indicators should be important for businesses as it is for DMOs. At least that's what we thought, that there needs to be a so-called hierarchy of how to represent these indicators. And then, of course, we had the three pillars of sustainability. Different responsibilities on who is actually responsible in creating the data and using the data and interpreting it. And we had a good basis of information because of several projects we did at university before in the last year. So we actually had a set of almost 3,000 indicators of about 50 different sustainability standards. This was already so much, it was overwhelming actually. And then we put something on top because we wanted to evaluate how scientific articles are dealing with these issues. So we also evaluated this, and then we also took a look at the EU and global initiatives. And to be honest, we did not really find something new. But what we did is we put this into a new perspective, because what was really important is that we had to set up some requirements on these indicators. We really needed to find out indicators that tackled a specific problem. So what we did first is we defined a problem. We defined the problem first, or the question first, before talking about the indicators. And then we try to match indicators towards the problem. But what we did then is we asked about a target. So what is actually the aim that, or the target that should be tackled? And the data should then tackle this, this question. And then, of course, what we also look at is that it needs to reflect tourism. Because what we found often is that the data reflects a more general view, or it is very specific, and it cannot be used if it doesn't really reflect the tourism specific issue in tourism planning. So this is why we really try to focus on data that is tourism specific. It, of course, should be regularly collected, and it should be clearly arranged, which means that there should be a clear description of the indicator and the value and the metrics and so on. And of course, it should be financially viable. And we said, okay, and now we need to talk about what do we want in terms of success. So what character should the indicators have in terms of tackling targets? So we took a look, are the indicators being reflected, for example, by minimum values? Or are they being reflected by possible benchmarks? Are they being reflected by normative or strategic or political targets? And can timelines be created through the data? And what we did is we put this all together and talked with these tourism stakeholders about this. This was tourism DMOs on the subnational level, so on the federal state level, and reflected upon these thoughts with them and set up an indicator set and talked about the main feasibility. And actually what we came up is with a set of 40 indicators. And I tried to now sort it for you in terms of how the quality of these indicators were being judged. And you will see that it's not that good, to be honest. So there is good indicators, and the best indicators we actually found were on the economic level. Yeah. The worst indicators in terms of reflecting the targets and the situations were in the social cultural area. And then there's this middle thing in between, which is the environmental area, where we have like some good KPIs and some that are still to be evaluated. What was quite shocking for us here in Germany is that we cannot really we do not have yet a good picture on the classic environmental flow indicators. This might have several reasons, and that's why I would like to talk maybe in the next 5 minutes about the two issues that is the focus of today, waste and water, because of course there were indicators that we thought of, yeah. We're presented by just two simple ones, like the most simple ones you can have, and we will probably talk a lot more about more detail today. So what we thought is that we need to know about the tourism-related water use, and we need to know how it's been reflected by tourism activities. We need to know about tourism-related solid waste. And the thoughts we had on these indicators were, yes, these indicators are of high relevance for the DMOs and the tourism stakeholders. They reflected us, yes, these are important indicators. And we also found that these indicators are represented in many standards and many sustainability frameworks, including target orientation. So it's not the problem of having a target, but it's about how to get the data. And even the indicator boundaries and the metrics are quite clear. So this is actually a good starting situation. And for water use, we already have national tourism-specific data by the system of environmental accounting and tourism satellite account. We developed indicators for that on the national level. In Germany, it's a specific situation because the wastewater treatment is not really an issue. So it's rather the water use. Yeah, it's not a wastewater treatment. So actually, there could be a focus on these indicators, but we could not find any methodological approach for the destination level. It was simply impossible to get a clear picture on how we can derive tourism-specific data out of this. And what we found, and this is not really new, but what became evident is that there is a big knowledge gap. There's a big knowledge gap between different stakeholders. the suppliers of water and waste talk about different things than the tourism stakeholders, and there are misleading perceptions on that, on necessities, on the data, on the use of data, and sometimes there's even no knowledge about these issues. Also in Germany, this is very specific, that water use is actually not always defined as necessary to measure, because there is a lot of rain in Germany. So there is not a clear long-term perspective on this issue yet. And in waste consumption, there is still the problem of how do we actually know about the composition of waste and the amount of waste, because in Germany, it's not being measured as in terms of the waste that is put there, but in terms of the containers that are being used. So we actually measure containers and not the waste. This is also a problem. So what did we find or define as gaps? Or solutions rather. So we believe in the work that we have done now is that we actually really need a lot more knowledge transfer. And this maybe supplements of what Mr. Pischlaner said, that the different stakeholders need to work better together. That waste and water is crucial in terms of circular economy overall and also in tourism, and that we need data for this in order to understand how we can get better. And then there is the issue of monitoring versus or monitoring plus management. I would call it like this, which means that, of course, we need to know how to monitor, but also how to manage this and who is responsible for the management of these issues. And there is not a clear picture on that yet in the German destinations, I have to say. So I hope to have some more input by you, how we can actually in Germany approach the situation better, because I believe that we need a transsectoral approach, putting stakeholders together and providing more knowledge on these issues. And then again, we need better measurement allocation. We need a sector-specific monitoring also for statistical purposes. And for this, I hope that we can actually start some pilot studies also in Germany to find out more how this can be done. And then there is a lot of modern technologies out there, but they are not being used yet as good as we would like to have it. We talked about it, Dirk, that there is smart sensoring out there. There is very good opportunities on actually getting a better picture on the data. And we need a methodological debate amongst different stakeholders. So the work that we have done here is that we said the water and waste in tourism are still issues that need way more reflection and a better focus. And the main learnings we actually had here is that we need to come together and to create the knowledge together and actually share the pain and collecting the data. And I'm sure that when we do this, we can actually earn the gain overall, meaning that the understanding of how tourism is working in the surrounding of this living region with all these different stakeholders, we can actually get a better picture on that overall. Thank you very much for having me here, and I hope I could give you some insights on what we have been doing.